Hi, Dr. Foster. So this is my second attempt at recording this presentation. The first one, I did not press record. So this should be better than the first time I gave it. Hello, and thank you so much for all your help this semester. I've learned a lot. This is the last assignment for my entire bachelor's degree, and I'm so excited to turn it in. So let's get started. I made a little PowerPoint presentation to explain the project. And let me just do a screen share. Okay, so here we go. So this is my family service project. As you know, I work in a skilled nursing facility as an occupational therapy assistant. And about half of the people that I work with speak Farsi as their native language. Farsi is spoken in Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. It is a distinct language from Arabic, but they do use the Arabic script. And most of my patients are Farsi-speaking Jews. They left Iran in the 70s as a result of the Islamic Revolution. So there's a bit of a generation gap between the parents, the grandparents, their children, and their grandchildren. The younger generation does tend to speak English, but the older generation, they tend to be Farsi-speaking only or speak very little English. So I think that I've noticed that the patients themselves have a hard time advocating in terms of their own family and then also in the bigger system because they don't speak the language that everyone else is speaking. And in terms of providing like client-centered services, that's a problem. Obviously, if the client doesn't speak the language that everyone around them is speaking, they are going to be a little impaired in making decisions for themselves. So I decided to translate our welcome packet. It's this guy here. We give it to all the patients when they come in. It's in English only. There's no Spanish version either, so we're going to work on that too. Maybe Russian as well. We have a lot of Russian patients, Russian-speaking patients. So this goes over everything. It goes over physician services, housekeeping, recreation, medication, discharge planning, grievances. It's very important information just to orient everyone to the facility. And right now, the family members usually provide the translation services. And I've noticed when they go over this with their parents, if they even do, or their grandparents, that they tend to really gloss over it. And there's a lot of very detailed information in this packet. So I just wanted the patients themselves to be able to read on their own time without the rush of having a family member translate our policies and procedures so they feel a little more oriented. I use software translation services that are freely available, in this case Google Translate. I also use this in treatment services at work. I typed it into a Word document first, and I will attach the original Word document and the Farsi version to the assignment in Canvas for you to review. A coworker of mine who is fluent in Farsi, she agreed to proofread it for me because Google Translate is fairly inaccurate for a lot of Farsi. It does a good job of getting the main points across, but it's definitely not something you'd want to present in a finished product. So she's proofread it, and our administrator got involved when he heard we were doing the project, and he wanted to send the packet for professional review before we actually got to use it with any patients. So that's what's happening now. He's reviewing it through a secondary translation service, and they're going to actually print out the document in this form to give to patients. So this helps families. Obviously, this is about being patient-centered, but how does it impact the family? So I think that in addition to allowing patients to advocate more for themselves in the system, patients are members of families. And when the services are provided in the language that the family speaks, but not the patient does not get to advocate for themselves in the same way that they would. So if they spoke English, so it just gives them an edge in their family. And mostly, I've noticed that translating is a very large burden, a caregiver burden that families have to take on in addition to learning the medical system and learning to manage their family members' care. They also have to provide translation services. So it's just another way that caregiving is time consuming and stressful for families. So I think the better effort we can put into making sure our services are provided in the patient's own languages, we can just reduce some of that caregiver burden, reduce burnout and fatigue, and that'll make everyone's lives better. Further services are huge. There's so much that can be done in this area. It's actually legally mandated that medical services be provided in the person's native language or language of choice, but that's mostly lip service. We have a telephone translation service that I have seen used not a single time since I've been working at the Rehab Center, which is 2 years now. It's frustrating to me because Google Translate is free. It's very easy to use on your phone. I can actually use it on my smart watch and just talk into the watch and talk to the patient. And then my watch talks to them in their language. So I'm the only person in our facility, we have about 150 employees, that I've ever observed to use translation service with a patient. I have given in services on this topic, and it's been difficult to convince other people to use the services. It adds some extra effort into your treatments. It's easier to just do something to someone, just give them their medication, just show them the exercise with your arms, than to actually explain in detail what the medication is, what the side effects are, how to use their body with the walker. So I think most people want to avoid that extra effort and they don't put it in. And so the services are not equivalent, which is a big problem. So I have failed in convincing my coworkers to use Google Translate so far. So I'm not going to stop trying. But I thought if I could get this packet into native languages of the people in the facility, then at least they could get oriented, and it might be more consistent than relying on someone else to do it for them. So I just want to improve their quality of care, but there's a lot that can be done. All of our documents need to be translated into their language. We have legal documents that they have to sign that are in English. And in many cases, the patients are their own advocates legally. They're not in a guardianship with their families, but the family members explain the legal documents to them and then they sign without ever actually reading what they're signing. So that's a goal as I continue to learn Farsi and stay at the Rehab Center. In terms of course concepts, I think the biggest concept that relates here, well, there's two. The minor one is family roles change as people become disabled, experience disabling conditions. So children take on more responsibilities and they become these new providers. In this case, they're providers of translation services for their parents. The other thing that they do is, well, this adds extra caregiver burden, like I discussed before. So I think this can serve as a coping resource for families who don't speak English as their first language, rather than an additional burden for them to overcome. And families, according to our reading, they don't all adapt to disability in the same way. It's highly dependent on their resources. And so I want to provide more resources to make the coping and adaptation process easier for families and caregivers as they experience disabling health conditions. That's my presentation. So I'm going to take you out of this screen and just show you the documents that I made. Here's the original welcome packet in Word. It just contains a lot of information about the business office, visitor policies, everything is in here. And a skilled nursing facility is a very singular environment. It's a total institution where none of the rules that exist in the real world apply. And so I think it's very helpful to have this information for patients to orient themselves, the smoking policy, gratuities, everything. That's the Word version, and then this is the version that I translated in Google Translate. So there were a lot of errors initially. I've gone and did some initial proofreading before I gave it to my coworker Tati. Obviously, there's some words that it can't translate, like HMO and Medicare. There's also no word for walker in Farsi, interestingly. But I went through and corrected all of the major errors that I could see, and then Tati kind of made it more grammatical before I submitted it to Freddie. So here it is, 26 beautiful pages. And I will attach both of these in Canvas. Thank you again for all your help this semester, and I hope we cross paths again. Bye.